Episode 122. Savior. Really? Jacob became interested. How is he doing?
He started a factory in London. He's usually very busy, but I heard that he is pretty well off,
Walter said. Oh, and how is little Carrot? She must be in some college there, right? Jacob asked. He was quite excited in his mind. That's the thing about nostalgia. We don't realize how dearly we hold on to our childhood until something randomly comes back one day, leaving us with a box of memories to reminisce about. After all, little Carrot was the girl whom he used to spend a lot of time with as a kid. Although he only had a vague impression of her, they still had a good friendship. The little Carrot must have grown up to be a lady now. Would she even remember me? Jacob thought.
That is the interesting part.
Walter kept talking excitedly.
It turns out that little Carrot is still in the States and is actually studying at your university.
What? Jacob was shocked. Little Carrot is a student at my college?
Apparently, when they first moved abroad, they didn't have enough money to take her with them. And after that, it just seemed like too much for a child to go and fit into a completely different country. Anyway, how about you try getting in touch with her? I think it'll not be too tough to find her at your college,
Walter suggested. What's her name? Jacob asked excitedly as well. He only remembered the nickname Little Carrot ever since his childhood, but never knew her real name. Even Walter was so used to calling her Little Carrot that he forgot her real name. It could be exciting to meet an old friend. I'm not sure what Little Carrot looks like now, Jacob thought.
Her name is Kathy.
Walter's voice echoed through the phone as the reception wasn't great. The bag full of snacks dropped onto the ground. What's her name? Jacob asked again.
Kathy. She is his only child, so he was hoping that once you contacted her, you two could take care of each other at the university. Anyway, I still have some things to work on. You can figure out a way to get in touch with her.
When he finished, Walter hung up the phone. Jacob was still standing in the same spot, holding his phone absent-mindedly. Are you playing jokes on me, God? Kathy is my little Carrot? At that moment, Jacob felt like he was being thrown into the water and pulled out again and again. Thus, Jacob had stood still and let the cold wind blow on him for a few minutes. Then, he suddenly called Vice Principal Liam's number.
Oh, hi, Jacob. What are you calling me for?
Liam's voice came through the phone. Elder Liam, you probably have the files of all the students at the university. Can you please help me look up how many girls at the university are named Kathy? Jacob asked on the phone. He thought for a while, then added, Please also look for names with the same sound but different characters. His voice started trembling.
Are you in a rush? I'm not at the university yet,
Liam asked. No rush, but please let me know once you have the results. Thank you so much. Jacob's heart felt like it would explode at any moment, but he somehow managed to hide his urgency from Liam.
Fine, I'll look it up for you as soon as I get there. Other than that, I heard that you have successfully advanced to the 3rd level of the Spirit Concentration Scroll,
Liam asked. Yes, it was a few days ago. Please help me out with the name search. Jacob hung up the phone. He was so absent-minded that he hung up the phone as soon as he finished his request. He didn't even notice that Liam was still trying to talk to him on the phone. Hanging up on the vice principal, Jacob really had the guts. After picking up the snacks from the ground, Jacob walked into the dorm building and started climbing the stairs to his room in a daze. Sam had already left the dorm to practice basketball. The other guys were still sleeping, but they woke up instantly and started to take Jacob's snacks as soon as they noticed that he was back. Jacob, why are you so dull? What happened? Going through a breakup? Seeing Jacob sitting on the chair and staring blankly outside, one of them asked, after taking a few bags of chips. Nothing. Jacob waved his hand blankly. Okay, I'm going to brush my teeth now. Later, we'll go to class together. He took a look at Jacob with concern before picking up his toothbrush. Half an hour later, Jacob went to the cafeteria for breakfast with his friends, and then they went to class together. At this time, almost half of the students were already waiting for the class to start and chatting with each other. Jacob noticed that Kathy was in the classroom as well, sitting in the second row and talking to the girls around her. Kathy avoided eye contact with Jacob when she saw him come in. She probably felt awkward because of the conversation they had on Friday, as it exposed her secret. Or maybe she was trying to keep some distance from Jacob because they had been too close to each other recently, and she didn't want other students to gossip about them. Sam came into the classroom sweating all over. He noticed Jacob's blank expression and felt something wasn't right. "Jacob, what's wrong?" He took a look at Kathy, who was sitting in the front, with purpose as he said this. Jacob ignored Sam's question as his phone started to vibrate. He grabbed it instantly and saw Liam's number, so he hurriedly picked it up.
"I just came to the university and looked it up. Among all the students at the university, no matter if it is the same pronunciation and characters or the same pronunciation but different characters, there is only one student named Kathy who is in your class. However, there was one Kathy who graduated 3 years ago, but only the pronunciation is the same,"
Liam said over the phone. "Okay, thanks a lot," Jacob said, and he had nothing else to say other than that. "There is another thing I want to mention, which is..." Liam was about to continue over the phone, but Jacob had already put the phone down blankly and hung it up at his convenience. He was the first person in history to hang up the vice principal's call twice in a day. Kathy was Little Carrot. Is she the little carrot I remember pulling on the corner of my clothes and following me around in her bare feet? The little girl who played with me all day and annoyed me to no end? Jacob couldn't comprehend the sudden revelation. A dozen years seemed to have slipped by too fast. Looking at Kathy, who was so mature and was sitting in the front rows, carefully listening while taking notes, Jacob felt like it was impossible to match her with the little girl in his hazy memory. When he saw Jacob was out of it, Sam lifted his right hand and waved it in front of Jacob's eyes. Thanks to him, Jacob came back to his senses and uttered a sigh of relief. "Where are you lost today?" Sam asked him. "It's nothing." Although Jacob said that, he couldn't calm himself down. Kathy and he had become great friends over the last few weeks, but he never imagined that he'd discover something like this. They were childhood friends. Kathy is the girl who used to say that she'll marry him when they grow up. Jacob found that the bracelets on his wrist were getting heavier as he was thinking about this. Therefore, he just laid his head on the desk and tried to calm himself down as he started to practice the spirit concentration scroll. The nature essence was cleansing Jacob's body while it circulated, and this helped to purify his body and emotions further. The warm amber on his necklace had also enhanced the communication Jacob had with heaven and the earth, so the spirit concentration scroll had been running more smoothly. With the recovery of his mood, the bracelets were gradually getting lighter, and Jacob could feel that the space around him had gotten closer. The amber Soph gave me really helped to quicken my cultivation, Jacob wondered as he paused his spirit concentration scroll. He took a look at Sam and the others beside him. They were all laying their heads on the desk and drooling. He took another look at Kathy. She was still carefully listening and taking notes. "I can deal with this later. Right now, my first priority is to break through to the first level." Jacob looked back at his hands, feeling like his skin had indeed gotten smoother. However, the bracelets were still heavily hanging on his wrists, reminding him that he was still Susan's captive. "These bracelets force me to keep running the spirit concentration scroll so I can resist their weight. They somehow also quicken my cultivation process. That woman may be devious, but she is a genius cultivator," Jacob thought. As soon as he used more nature essence, the bracelets immediately sensed it and started to increase their weight instantly. "They are unique treasures," Jacob mocked himself secretly. The bell rang, indicating the end of the class. Sam and the other two guys shook their bodies and woke up abruptly. They walked out of the classroom with Jacob, pushing each other. Kathy packed her stuff and walked behind Jacob. As Jacob walked out of the door while being pushed by Sam, he suddenly saw two beautiful girls who were wearing long, flowy dresses standing respectfully by the door, as if they had just come out of a painting.
"Savior,"
they said in unison. Episode 123, Jade and Julia. Both of the pretty girls were wearing long dresses that were fluttering elegantly in the wind. These two girls were completely identical in matters of looks. Long black hair, fair skin, and icy blue eyes. The only differentiating factor between them was the color of their dresses. One was light blue, while the other was light green. Jacob looked at them in great shock, but he suddenly realized they were the sisters he saved at the Dragon Palace a while back.
"Savior!"
Receiving no reaction from Jacob, they said to him again. Their bright and pleasing voices went into everyone's ears as if they were the sound of nature. All the students who were eager to get out of class suddenly stopped to witness the scene unfold. Why are you guys here?" Jacob asked, while fumbling with words.
"We are here to thank you for saving our lives,"
the girl in light blue said. From their appearance, they looked like identical twins. Jacob couldn't figure out who was the older sister and who was the younger sister, so he just took the one who was talking as the older sister. Sam and the others who stood beside Jacob all looked at him and the two girls in shock.
"Savior who saved their lives? What? Are they shooting a movie right now?"
they thought. Kathy also stared at Jacob and the two sisters in shock. She blinked her eyes and had no idea what was going on. Jacob also looked around, noticing how his classmates and friends were staring at the girls weirdly. "Why does this always happen to me?" he thought with a cringe. "Don't mention it." Taking a few steps, Jacob responded awkwardly. The twin sisters followed his steps. Jacob picked up the pace, and so did they. Jacob stopped suddenly, and they stopped as well. They followed Jacob the entire time. Jacob felt helpless. Then he looked back at them and said, "What on earth do you guys want?" In unison, they said,
"We will be serving you, our Savior, from now on."
The sisters seemed to be really in sync with each other. Jacob froze. It was lucky that Sam and his buddies were so stunned that they stopped at the classroom door and could only look at them as they walked away. The guys didn't have the chance to hear the sisters' response. "Don't worry about it." All Jacob could do was patiently explain the situation to them. "I wasn't looking for repayment when I saved you guys."
"Savior, you rescued my older sister from the Ice Palace. I would like to be your maid to express my gratitude,"
the girl in light green said to Jacob. Jacob looked at her, realizing that his guess was right and that the girl in light blue was the older sister. However, a word like maid still made him feel awkward and uncomfortable.
"Savior, you did such a favor for me. I was trapped in ice and had to fight against the chill from the black ice with my energy every second. I wouldn't have lasted 100 years if my younger sister hadn't supported me with her own energy. Thank you, Savior, for rescuing me. Otherwise, I would have only lived for another 10 years. My younger sister is my twin, and we have a special connection. She will die as soon as I die."
the older sister explained.
The reason the younger sister willingly spent over 100 years with her older sister was to give her older sister a chance to survive.
Jacob was touched when he witnessed the deep sisterhood between them.
If I didn't save them, the older sister's remaining energy wouldn't allow her to live for more than 10 years, and the younger sister would be risking her life if she tried to save her older sister. That's why they wanted to thank me, he thought. I guess the palace didn't want to get into any trouble because of it, so General Arthur probably wanted to get it over with by using me as an excuse, which also might have gotten him some credits.
Seeing Jacob remaining in silence, the older sister said again,
Our lives are all yours now, Savior. Since we are off the hook now, we would like to serve you and shield you from all dangers.
It wasn't that big of a deal, really. Jacob waved his hands hurriedly and said, It is good that you are out now. Start your life here on Earth since you can't go back anymore.
Savior.
The younger sister wanted to say something but was interrupted by Jacob. All right, let's not talk about it anymore. Living a good life is the best reward for me. The sister's attitude softened as Jacob's got tougher. They bent their heads slightly and replied,
Yes.
Jacob felt even more helpless as he observed his sisters following him so obediently. You can go back now. Please go back now.
Savior,
the younger sister continued to say in a low voice.
Savior, can you bring us to the market?
The market? Jacob looked at her, puzzled.
My sister and I want to get some socks,
the younger sister explained in a light voice. That's it? Jacob had almost begun to sweat from his forehead. Sure, I'll take you to the market near the university. Afterward, he tried to encourage them. The way you just spoke was nice. Don't call yourselves maid anymore.
Okay, we will strictly follow your orders,
they answered at the same time. Jacob uttered a sigh. He almost broke down. He didn't bother explaining anymore, and he brought them downstairs and walked towards the market near the university. On the way there, the two sisters were still communicating with their eyes while blindly following Jacob like two sidekicks. Do you live at Elder Liam's right now? After walking for a few steps, Jacob asked them. Hearing Jacob's question, they walked 2 steps forward, moving to each of his sides. The older sister answered,
Yes, we are temporarily living at Elder Liam's, but we can move to your place if you need us.
No. Jacob was scared of them now. I was just asking. I didn't mean anything else. Hearing Jacob's response, the sisters communicated with their eyes again, having no clue whether their answer was proper or not. Even the looks on their faces showed their worries. What are your names? Jacob asked again.
Elder Liam said that since we have new identities now, he gave us new names. My name is Jade, and my sister is Julia,
the older sister, in a light blue dress, said. Okay, Jacob nodded. Jade and Julia. Sound common, but still easy to say. Seeing that Jacob had stopped asking questions, the sisters didn't say anything out of caution. The students on the campus all looked back at Jacob because of the 2 beautiful companions he had. Once they got to the superstore, Jacob brought them to the store shelves to look for socks. Although the superstore was tiny, it still had a variety of products. Jade and Julia were picking out socks and casually spoke with each other. They had a deep relationship, but were still as cautious about the new world as 2 birds. Jacob looked down and laughed. He thought about it and admitted that he would be lost too if he had to come back to the world 200 years later. He gave some money to them and said, "You guys pick. You can pay at the cashier near the door." He headed out of the superstore after he finished talking. After all, It didn't seem proper for a guy to stand in the area for girls' stuff. As he was walking out of the superstore, Lisa, the most popular girl in college, had just come in. Enemies were destined to meet. Jacob didn't have a good impression of her, and neither did she of him. Jacob moved to his left to make way for her because he didn't want anything to do with her. However, Lisa happened to walk on the right side while also trying to avoid him. As a consequence, they blocked each other's way. Jacob moved to his right while Lisa moved to her left side, and they ended up blocking each other's way again. This kind of situation was quite comical, but the prideful Lisa couldn't bear it. She suddenly became furious and screamed, "You idiot! What are you doing?" Jacob also got mad all of a sudden. He stepped back and stared at her, but he then felt like a gentleman shouldn't argue with a lady. Therefore, he turned around with a long face and didn't say anything to her. However, Lisa took the opportunity to continue the argument. She clamored, "Were you trying to take advantage of me? How dare an idiot like you try to take advantage of me? You can't even afford some good clothes, and you have no money or taste. You only have some stupid strength." It was still morning, so there weren't that many people in the superstore. However, the ones that were in there all looked toward them. Jacob had defeated Michael many times now. Therefore, Lisa, who admired Michael, had been annoyed by Jacob. She wouldn't let this opportunity slip away, so she kept screaming, "People like you just have no charm at all. I wouldn't even take a look at you. No girl would ever like you, no matter how hard you try." Relying on the fact that she was a girl and the school sweetheart who had countless fans, Lisa shouted ever more arrogantly. In her mind, Jacob was just an ordinary student who had useless strength and won over Michael by luck. Suddenly, two girls appeared out of nowhere and stood on either side of Jacob, holding his arms.
"Who are you?"
Staring at Lisa, Julia asked with hostility. Seeing the two pretty girls beside Jacob, Lisa couldn't come up with a proper response, as Jade and Julia were both way more beautiful than her. "Leave her alone. Have you finished shopping?" Jacob asked them.
"Yes."
Jade and Julia both nodded sweetly. They ignored Lisa on Jacob's command and walked out of the superstore while holding his arms, leaving Lisa standing there in astonishment. Episode 124, An Old Friend. After walking out, the calm look on Jacob's face gradually became awkward. He slightly pulled his hands back, wanting to get out of the sisters' hold, and thankfully they took the hint. Both of them, in sync as always, moved a little away, not leaving their places though. They accompanied Jacob on each side. Although the colors of their dresses were different, their appearance was the same. Their silky black hair went all the way down to their waist. It didn't matter if it was from a distance or up close. Both of them were absolutely breathtaking. They were from the heavenly realm, after all. They were so elegant and gorgeous that they looked like they had just come out of a poster. They didn't even ask who that girl was. As long as Jacob didn't mention anything, they would stay beside him and remain silent. After walking for a while, Jacob asked suddenly, "You have gotten your socks already. Anywhere else you want to go?"
"We will go wherever Savior wants to go,"
they answered in unison. Jacob uttered a sigh. "Please don't call me Savior." Jade and Julia turned around and looked at each other and then at Jacob. They said at the same time,
"Master."
Their tone and angelic voices could stun anyone who has heard it. Jacob shook his head with a deep breath and said helplessly, "Just call me Jacob."
"No."
Jade shook her head immediately.
"Master, you are the person who saved our lives. Neither of us would ever be disrespectful like that."
Fine. Jacob didn't want to deal with them anymore. "I have class later, so please stop following me around." The sisters looked at each other again. This time, the younger sister, Julia, said,
"We will comply with your wishes. Since Master doesn't want us to follow him, we will go now. However, Master can call us whenever you need us. My older sister and I have already made the promise that we will serve Master for 100 years to return Master's favor. Therefore—"
Jacob interrupted. All right, I got it now. I don't really need your help at the moment. You can go back now." Julia nodded before taking out a small white bell that was tied onto a beautiful string. She lifted Jacob's left arm without any warning and carefully put it on for him.
"Inside the bell, there is a wisp of spirit energy from my older sister and I. Anytime you need us, you can simply think of us without using any spells and slightly shake the bell. My sister and I will fly to wherever you are."
After tying the bell tightly on Jacob's hand, Julia explained to him. Jacob looked at the beautiful bell for a moment. He had nothing else to say and could only nod. Now there were 2 bracelets from Susan on his wrists, and there was a necklace, also from Susan, on his neck that was decorated with an amber pendant that was from Sophie. Now, with the small bell given by the sisters, he was wearing more jewelry than any girl in his class. "Wait." Jacob suddenly remembered something and asked, "You had said that you had been fighting against the chill from the black ice for the past 200 years with the help of Julia, and you both only have a little bit of energy left?" Hearing the question from Jacob, Julia nodded immediately.
"Yes, Master. Our energy could only last 10 years, but it won't be a problem anymore. We are free right now and do not need to consume our energies. My older sister and I will cultivate again and enhance our power in order to ensure your safety."
Hadn't Susan said that each of them possessed top-tier 7th-level power? She probably exaggerated the fact. They only have about 5% of their original power left, he thought. Wondering about this in his mind, Jacob asked them, "Does that mean you two only have 5% of the power of a top-tier 7th-level master to use now?" Jade and Julia looked at each other and shook their heads.
"Master, the techniques we cultivate are different from the ones in the dragon tribe. Thus, the level of our power isn't ranked by the levels here. However, the power that we can use right now is probably at the 7th level if we convert it to this ranking system."
Jacob was too stunned to move after hearing her answer. What? The remaining 10-year energy is equivalent to the 7th level in the dragon tribe? If they wait until their powers fully recover, no wonder Susan, who is always so calm and known as a master, couldn't even keep still, he thought. Noticing that the look on Jacob's face had changed, Julia said in haste,
"You can rest assured, Master. Although my sister and I have limited power at the moment, we will still try our best to ensure your safety. Meanwhile, we will concentrate on cultivating to recover our lost strength so that we can have the actual power to serve you."
The older sister, Jade, kept nodding as the younger sister, Julia, explained. They seemed guilty, probably because they thought the remaining power they had wasn't enough to protect Jacob, which made it sound like a joke. Receiving no response from Jacob, Jade and Julia looked at each other again, realizing that they might have talked too much. They said to Jacob,
"Master, please call us if you need us. We should get going."
Then they held on to each other's hands. Julia waved her hand and was about to make a move, but Jade reminded her instantly. Julia realized her mistake and nodded, and then both of them walked into the campus. Jacob knew clearly that he would be drowning in questions from those gossipy guys if he went back to the dorm right now. Therefore, he started to walk around the campus and began cultivating the Spirit Concentration Scroll to enhance the 3rd level. He spent the rest of his morning in a quiet corner of the campus cultivating. It was finally lunchtime. Jacob had some lunch and then went to the class. The textbooks weren't really necessary for a big class like this. Jacob went into the class without anything and saw Sam and the other guys already sitting in the good spots in the last row. Kathy was also there and sitting in the first row. Seeing Jacob showing up at the front door, Kathy stood up suddenly and went to the door.
Jacob, can I have a few words with you?"
Jacob was quite confused, but still nodded. Kathy then walked out of the class, and Jacob followed her out. Outside the class, there was a patio area that could be accessed through the glass door. Jacob went out with Kathy, thinking of what she could possibly be wanting to talk about.
"I have been doing some thinking lately,"
Kathy said.
"Oh?
About what?" Jacob thought Kathy was going to ask about the sisters, but she didn't mention it at all, which puzzled him.
"It is about me getting too close to you recently."
Looking at Jacob, Kathy continued.
"You've been a good friend to me, and I taught you how to play basketball because I wanted you to do well in the match. I don't care about others' opinions."
"Okay." Jacob nodded and got nervous suddenly. He didn't know if this was the right time to tell her who he really was, since there were only the two of them at the moment.
"However, I thought about it last weekend and realized that it was my mistake. I think you are a nice guy after I got to know more about you, so I gradually started to see you as my good friend. At first, I was just curious, but later I couldn't help but get closer to you. I didn't want to have any wrong impression of our friendship, so after struggling for a long time, I think it is better to make it clear,"
Kathy said in a sincere and apologetic voice. He just smiled at her and replied, "Hey, it's okay. I know that you already have someone that you like."
"Yes."
Kathy nodded slightly. Jacob thought for a while and asked, "Can I know who he is?" Kathy contemplated for a bit before coming to a decision. She bit her lips before turning around to look at the sky and clouds.
"You are a close friend now, so don't laugh at me once I tell you."
She took a deep breath and said,
"The person I like, he is actually an old friend I've known since I was little. I used to call him Jakey."
Episode 125, Heartbroken Jacob. Jakey. Hearing the name come out of Kathy's mouth, Jacob was immediately reminded of the nickname his family called him when he was a kid. With the sound of her voice, all of the memories from deep within his brain began to rush in. The chubby little carrot used to follow her Jakey everywhere he went, and he was always pretending to be a big man. That little carrot who left strings of messy and cluttered footprints on the beach. She always picked up a bunch of beautiful shells, and she would then shove them into Jakey's hands as a gift, he recalled. Kathy turned and held her gaze at Jacob, who was now speechless with his eyes widened. Lowering her head, she mocked herself while laughing.
"It's quite silly, isn't it? Actually, it's stupider than you think. I've been waiting for him more than a decade now, and I don't even know if I'll ever see him again."
At that moment, Jacob was so stunned that he couldn't utter a single word. In fact, he felt a little dizzy and quickly reached out to grab onto the door's handle. He was afraid he would fall straight off the roof if he didn't steady himself.
"To be honest, after getting to know you more, I thought we got along quite well. I don't know if it's just my mind playing tricks on me, but I think you somehow reminded me of him."
Kathy smiled faintly and said with resignation,
"Anyway, that's about it."
As she finished, she headed towards the glass door. Locking his eyes on her, Jacob suddenly asked again, "Is he really that amazing?" He was now sure that Kathy was Little Carrot, but he still wanted to double-check that he was the one she was talking about. Kathy paused and turned back to look at Jacob.
"He should be. Both of his parents had great academic backgrounds. His father and my father were classmates, and his father supposedly had the best grades at the university back then. Hence, I think he would have followed in his father's footsteps."
"Is that why you study so hard?" Jacob continued inquiring.
"Yeah,"
Kathy nodded.
"I imagine that he must be a person of great talent, and I want to be on his level whenever we meet."
"But you haven't seen each other in more than a decade. How do you know if he will ever come back?" Jacob couldn't help but ask again. With every question that he had asked, he felt that his heart had trembled with it.
"Are you trying to talk me out of it, or what?"
Kathy's tone suddenly became cold.
"I have my own beliefs. Even though his family and mine have lost contact, as they have sold their old place and might not even live in the city anymore, I still believe that he will return one day."
"What if he already has a girlfriend?" Clenching his teeth, Jacob further questioned.
"If he has a girlfriend, I will give him my best wishes. Either way, I want to wait for him. I guess it is like an obsession I have had for most of my life."
After that, Kathy seemed to think that Jacob's line of questioning had the wicked intention of wavering her from her belief. So she added,
"No matter what you say, or what others say, I firmly believe that he must be an amazing person, and I am willing to wait. I am willing to wait in the hope of being with him one day. Even if he is not good-looking at all, or his family is not in good condition now, as long as he is still the same good person, I want to try and get in touch with him."
"Well then." Jacob nodded his head as there was nothing else he could say. Seeing that Jacob's interest was fading, Kathy noticed that she might have been taking a slightly harsh tone.
"You can say that I am naive or obsessive, but that is who I am. At any rate, I'm only telling you so much because I think of you as a very good friend."
Jacob's mind was completely blank. He had no idea what he was supposed to do or say. Kathy sighed and said to him,
"I have never had good male friends in the past, so I might not know the boundaries well. If there was anything I did that might have misled you, I am really sorry. From now on, I will try my best to behave appropriately."
After clearing everything from her side, she tried to lighten the mood and gently punched Jacob's shoulder.
"I know you have a crush on Susan. Just take this as me being sentimental and wanting to share my mind with you."
Jacob let out a chuckle and rolled his eyes at her lame attempt to cut the awkwardness as he walked towards the glass door too. On his way, he abruptly asked Kathy again, "Are you not going to ask me about today's incident with those two girls?"
"I know that I can be pretty intrusive, and I'm trying to work on that, so I won't ask anything personal about you from now on,"
Kathy replied with ease. Jacob nodded as he pushed open the door and got to the main floor of the building. He was actually thankful for this change in her. It would save him a lot of anxiety and lies. Then, his mind wandered off to the issue at hand. He had no idea how to tell Kathy the truth because the one she adored was actually the Jakey.
As an afterthought, I think since I was so introverted and nerdy since childhood, I started waiting for Jakey so I would not focus on these relationships and all in school and focus on my future,"
Kathy suddenly added as she followed Jacob back to the classroom. Jacob nodded in acknowledgement. He realized that Jakey had become a guardian and had helped Kathy keep her mind focused just on her studies. He was in awe of the fact that he had obviously resided in her heart for more than a dozen years. As they entered the classroom, the class was about to start in 10 minutes. Seeing that Jacob and Kathy had had a conversation outside and had walked in together, the other guys began winking at him, curious about the content of their dialogue. "Did you finally confess to Kathy and get rejected today?" Sam asked as he saw Jacob returning with an ashen face.
"Sam, come out for a second."
Standing by the door, Kathy pointed at Sam as she requested. Sam was surprised. He was not expecting this. He hesitated for a second, then walked to the door. Following Kathy, they both disappeared from the room. A few minutes later, Sam returned. As he had no luck trying to get Jacob to talk, his roommate curiously turned to Sam and asked, "What did she talk to you about?" "She told me a little about the basketball match, and then she reminded us not to spread rumors blindly. She and Jacob are only good friends. She emphasized that we should avoid spreading rumors that could embarrass them and make their relationship awkward," Sam said thoughtfully.
"Good friends?"
Brushing his chin with his fingers, the guy was trying to understand the real meaning of those words.
"Ryan, can you come out too?"
As there were still a few minutes before class, Kathy was now waving at Ryan, who was seated in the second last row. Scratching his head, Ryan stood up and scuttled out. As a male student in the class, this was his first time being summoned by Kathy. Soon, he also returned. Their conversation was similar to the one Kathy had with Sam, except that she did not mention anything about the basketball match this time. All in all, her primary objective was to clear up her relationship with Jacob. Kathy is now taking this very seriously. Due to the guy's instigation, she probably doesn't want me to develop any feelings for her. Observing Kathy, who had now returned to her seat in the front and was quietly waiting for class to start, Jacob couldn't help but wonder what her reaction would be if he were to call out Little Carrot at that moment. "Regardless of what Kathy said, I still think she's interested in you." After a moment of silence, Sam whispered, as he patted Jacob with his hand.
"Enough is enough. Stop saying that,"
Jacob suddenly said. This was the first time that Jacob had lost his temper in front of Sam. As Jacob's best friend, Sam was now dumbfounded and at a loss for words. Their other roommates were watching this interaction silently as they concluded that Kathy may really have rejected Jacob. On the other hand, Jacob was still hung up on the fact that he was the one Kathy liked, or should we say, Jakey. Jacob recalled the big mason jar he had at home that still contained the ample amount of shells she picked up for him. He didn't even throw it away when a lot of the stuff was lost during his family's move. "You missed the Jakey who helped you sharpen shells into chalk to doodle on rocks, and I missed the little Carrot who always tagged along and accompanied me for any crazy ideas I had." Those were indeed some of his best childhood memories. Yet he did not expect Little Carrot to stay in the city in anticipation of Jakey's return. Even though Jacob found Little Carrot to be exceptionally stubborn, he felt deeply moved at the same time. At that moment, the bell had announced the end of the class. After Kathy put away her textbooks, she turned around to look at Jacob. She gave him a small smile and turned back to her friend. Wrapping her arm around Kathy's, her friend said,
"Let's go. Don't you have to go to the library?"
"Yep, let's go." Biting her lip, Kathy headed to the door. On the other hand, the guys tried asking Jacob about his conversation earlier, but he refused to open his mouth. Without any word from him, they just assumed that he had been rejected by Kathy when he asked her out. Jacob rolled his eyes at the ignorant remark and didn't say anything. "It's like arguing with a wall," he thought. The four went straight to the internet cafe. On their way, noticing that Jacob seemed to be feeling better, Sam and the others couldn't help but inquire about the two pretty girls. Yet Jacob would not say a word about it. The others thought he was still mourning over his failure in love. Thus, they stopped any further questioning. It was around 6 when Jacob went back to their room to get his tutoring materials and left for the bus stop. After hopping onto the bus, Jacob found a seat and sat down. Unexpectedly, a shade of light blue and a shade of light green had leaped into his sight. Holding their bus tickets, they swiftly scanned the crowd and arrived right in front of Jacob. "You two!" Jacob looked at them in shock.
Elder Liam said that Master is paying a visit to the Dragon King's home tonight. So we have decided to accompany you so that we can show our gratitude to the Dragon King as well,
they stated as they sat by Jacob's side. Episode 126. 2 More Warriors. Seeing that Jacob seemed puzzled, Jade, the older sister, added,
"We have informed Elder Liam, and he said it'd be fine."
If that was the case, Jacob believed that Dracon must know about it as well. Realizing that, he now felt more comfortable with the idea. Otherwise, it would have been very strange for him to bring the two to Dracon's home for dinner. During the ride, Jacob opened his bag and began reviewing the tutoring materials that he had prepared some time ago. Since a lot had happened, he had stopped tutoring Sophie for a few days. Also, because Sophie had just finished her midterm exams, he figured that he should give her a break. Seated on Jacob's 2 sides, the sisters stealthily leaned towards Jacob as they were curious about the materials in his hands. Jacob froze at once as he realized that the girls had unknowingly entered his personal space. He coughed slightly while straightening his body and putting away the materials. Only then did they finally move back to their former positions. Apparently, being stuck in ice for 200 years makes you lose your sense of space. "Have you been staying at Elder Liam's place for the past few days?" Jacob asked.
"Yes."
They both nodded.
"Elder Liam has been teaching us about how things work in this world, and we have been trying our best to learn as much as possible,"
Julia explained. Jacob nodded his head approvingly. He could tell that they both had incredible adaptability and learning capacity from the way they smoothly used their bus tickets when they got on the bus. As Jacob stopped talking, they remained silent as well. They were scared of being too much of a bother to their master. When the bus arrived at the stop near Sophie's home, Jacob got off the bus, with the sisters following right behind him. As they were wearing very old-fashioned chiffon long dresses, the sisters attracted immense attention from the pedestrians, especially the males, who were constantly stealing glances at them. The fact that they were following closely behind Jacob had raised questions among the fascinated spectators. Paying no attention to the pedestrians, Jacob turned around the corner, walked straight to Sophie's house, and pressed the doorbell. "Coming!" Helen came up and opened the door. Smiling at Jacob and looking at the sisters behind him, she said, "Come in."
"Thank you, Dragon Queen."
The crisp and clear voices of Jade and Julia resounded in unison. Helen smiled as she turned and called out, "Soph, Dracon, dinner time." Jacob saw that a fancy dinner had already been prepared in the dining room, and also noticed that Helen was not surprised to see the sisters at all. He was now certain that Dracon and Helen must have known about the sisters' arrival in advance. Soon, Sophie sprinted down the stairs in her pink pajamas, and Dracon walked down unwaveringly from his bedroom. As soon as he reached the living room, Jade and Julia walked in front of him with their heads lowered and said together,
"We are truly grateful for the Dragon King's help."
"It was Jacob who said to let you go, and it was a favor done at little cost. If you have to thank someone, thank Jacob instead." Dracon pointed at the dining room with his right hand and said, "Let's go eat."
"Thank you, Dragon King."
Again, Jade and Julia said in unison. Yet, they did not show much of a reaction when Sophie appeared in front of them. "This is my daughter, Sophie." Dracon introduced them.
"Honored to meet you, Princess,"
the sisters responded.
"Who are they?"
Blinking her eyes, Sophie turned to ask Dracon. She rarely went back to the Dragon Palace, let alone visit a cold place like the Ice Palace. Thus, she was completely unaware of the existence of the sisters. "Sophie, don't be rude." Dracon became serious and scolded. "In terms of seniority, they are much older than you."
I am Jade, and I am Julia.
The sisters introduced themselves respectively.
Oh, hello, Jade and Julia.
Since Sophie was upset about being scolded by her father, she responded indifferently.
All right, now that we have all introduced one another, let's sit down and eat,
Helen urged as she attempted to ease the situation. Seeing that Jacob had seated himself, Jade and Julia pulled out 2 chairs and each sat on one side of Jacob after bowing slightly. In response, Helen turned and looked at Dracon, but she did not say anything. The sight of Jacob having the company of 2 beautiful girls had irritated Sophie even more, as she had a frown on her face now.
Jacob, you have a basketball match this Thursday night, don't you?
Helen came up with a topic. Well, yes, but I'm not the lead player. I'm just there to make up the numbers, Jacob answered with a faint smile.
I heard about it from Soph. Since we don't have anything planned for Thursday night, Dracon, Soph, and I have decided to go watch your game at your school,
Helen announced softly.
Oh, sure. That'll be great,
Jacob concurred immediately. He was thinking that it would be quite a sight if both his family and Soph's family were going to be in the audience in the stadium. One party was the scientists that the school dared not neglect, and the other was the school's biggest sponsor. On the other hand, Jade and Julia only quietly listened to their conversation and added no thoughts of their own. Jacob, it seems that you are on the 3rd level of the Spirit Concentration Scroll, Dracon asked as he focused on Jacob.
Yes, it happened last week. I got lucky, Jacob answered.
Great. Dracon nodded in approval. How about you take a stroll with me to the Dragon Palace tonight, and I can pick out a suitable cultivation technique for you so that you can cultivate to 1st level as soon as possible.
Sure.
Jacob humbly nodded his head. Jade and Julia, you both can come as well. You can provide some advice, Dracon added.
Of course, Dragon King. We will always be by our master's side,
the sisters declared at once. Sophie pursed her lips at their response. Half an hour later, dinner was over. As Helen began cleaning up the table, she asked Jacob and Soph to head upstairs for their tutoring session. I'll go get ready. We will leave in half an hour, Dracon said to Jacob.
Jade, Julia, it might be quite late when you return from the Dragon Palace. You can stay here tonight instead of going back to Elder Liam's place, Helen suggested to the sisters.
However, the sisters turned to seek Jacob's opinion.
Jacob, you should stay here tonight as well, since you probably won't be able to make it back to school in time, Helen said to Jacob.
Sure. Noting that Jacob had agreed, Jade and Julia nodded at Helen as well. As the sisters were following Jacob upstairs, Helen looked at Dracon with concern.
You don't think this will become a problem with those 2 following Jacob around, do you? She asked.
Dracon gave her a questioning look, not really understanding the meaning of his wife's words. With a frown, Helen told him her real concern.
They are such beautiful girls. If they are to follow Jacob around all the time, I worry that Soph...
Shaking his head, Dracon interrupted. With no help from elixirs or treasures, Jacob has cultivated to the 3rd level of the Spirit Concentration Scroll in such a short period. That tells us how hard and seriously he has worked. Yet, what has Soph done? After the incident, I haven't even seen her cultivate at all. I think that for certain matters, she has to fight for it herself. As Helen was trying to come up with a suitable response, Dracon reached out his hand and gently tapped her forehead. Moreover, those 2 are top-tier, 7th-level masters. What does that mean? If they are willing to be Jacob's guardians, that would mean the North Atlantic would gain 2 more warriors. My brother Kenneth is the strongest in the North Atlantic, but he has begun his isolation cultivation period to prepare for the heavenly tribulation next month. The South Atlantic has been restless and is just waiting for a chance to cause trouble. This is the time when the North Atlantic could use all the help we can get. Episode 127, Cultivation Techniques. Just as Dracon and Helen were having their discussion on the first floor, Jacob brought the tutoring materials to Sophie's room on the second floor. Hesitating slightly, Jade and Julia followed him into the room. Sophie was already sitting on her desk when Jacob walked into her room. The smile that lighted her face on seeing him dimmed as she noticed the girls following closely after him. "We only have half an hour this time. Let's focus on English only." Jacob pulled up a chair and sat down next to Sophie. Then he spread open the materials and started talking about some topics.
"I still have a pile of homework to finish today,"
Sophie objected as she bit her lips. "Today's session is only half an hour long. Can't you do your homework later?" Jacob locked his eyes on her. Nibbling on her bottom lip, Sophie looked at Jacob fixedly as well. Both of them were on edge for some reason, probably because of the other people in what was usually their space. They both just kept looking at each other silently.
"Okay, it's just half an hour."
Sophie finally gave in with a sigh. Jacob smiled victoriously. He then looked at the materials in his hands and began explaining. Sophie silently started taking notes as they fell into their normal tutoring pattern.
"This English thingy seems very difficult."
Standing behind Jacob, Julia whispered to Jade, who was standing next to her.
"If you find it difficult, then ask Master and see if he has time to tutor you on it too,"
Jade responded. Hearing that, Julia rapidly waved her hands and said, softly,
"This is the privilege of the princess. I can't dare to ask Master to tutor me."
Jacob noticed them chattering quietly and turned around. Seeing that they were standing behind him the whole time, he said, "You don't have to be standing. Find a place to sit." Right at this moment, Helen pushed the door open and came in. She waved at the sisters and said, "Jade, Julia, come with me to the next room. I've made your bed for you. Come to see if you like it." Again, Jade and Julia looked to Jacob, seeking permission. "Go ahead and get some rest, too. I will tutor Soph for half an hour, and then we will head out," Jacob told them.
"Yes."
The sisters nodded and followed Helen to the guest room next door. Looking at the alluring figures of Jade and Julia, Sophie frowned again.
"You must be over the moon with 2 pretty girls following you around every day now, right?"
"What, are you jealous now?" Jacob asked, teasingly.
"I'm not jealous."
Jacob's teasing irked Sophie as she lightly hit Jacob on his chest. Jacob grabbed onto her hand and held it tightly to stop her. "You have nothing to worry about," he leaned closer to her and said with a wink. Sophie blushed at his antics and focused her attention back on the notes in front of her, escaping the conversation. Time was ticking away as the two were immersed in their session. They didn't notice where the 30 minutes went as they studied a bit while bickering and teasing each other from time to time. They both were more at ease now that they were alone. "Jacob, time to go." Suddenly, Dracon knocked on the door. "Okay, coming," Jacob answered as he closed up the materials and turned to Sophie. "We'll call it a night now. You can get back to the homework you were so worried about."
"All right. Have a good time at the palace."
Sophie smiled at him. After placing his stuff neatly by the corner of the desk, Jacob walked out and found Dracon waiting in the hall with the sisters. Well, let's go. Dracon led them downstairs. Helen was fiddling with an architectural model in the living room when she saw the group come down. She stopped and asked, "You're going now?" "Yes. I will take Jacob there to pick out a cultivation technique. This is a very important choice since it will dictate the future direction of Jacob's cultivation," Dracon remarked composedly. Helen responded with a nod and saw them to the door as Dracon led Jacob and the sisters out. Observing the solemnity on Dracon's face, Jacob realized that he should not take tonight's decision lightly as well. "Driving will be too slow. Jacob, since you are on the 3rd level of the Spirit Concentration Scroll, your resistance to the effects of spells should be stronger. Let's travel there directly." With a wave of a hand, Dracon created a transparent energy sphere and had it surround himself and Jacob completely. In response, without any physical movements, Jade and Julia directly raised a ring of rainbow-colored energy around them. Shortly, the ring of lights became gray and dimmed as the sisters were worried about attracting too much attention. "Rise!" As Dracon raised both of his hands, the silver energy sphere that enveloped both himself and Jacob rapidly traveled towards the direction of the beach. Paying close attention, Jade and Julia followed right after them. At this hour, no one would notice 3 flashes of light sweeping towards the ocean at a low altitude. As they flew past the beach, they continued gliding on the surface of the ocean for a while. Shortly, the lights began descending rapidly and directly to the bottom of the ocean. Jade and Julia's descending speeds were as fast as Dracon's energy sphere, if not faster. Their incredible abilities as 7th-level masters were well demonstrated. "Grand Array Formation, open." After moving down vertically for a while in the ocean, Dracon suddenly opened his arms and pointed downwards. With a flash of fluttering silver light, the full view of the majestic Dragon Palace had appeared before their eyes. To support Jacob, Dracon descended at a slow pace. As they landed, the silver Palace Protection Grand Array formation above their heads immediately closed up. Following them, Jade and Julia also reached the ground of the Dragon Palace. Even after such a long flight, no signs of fatigue or uneasiness could be seen on the sisters' faces. On the other hand, Jacob, who was being dragged by Dracon, had turned ghastly pale. It was obvious that he had been running the Spirit Concentration Scroll continuously to the best of his ability during the flight. Consequently, he had exhausted the nature essence of his body. "Your strength is still too weak," Dracon observed. "With that being said, the Spirit Concentration Scroll is only a very basic cultivation technique. Understandably, it would be a little too much for you to fly such a long distance with me," he said as he let go of Jacob.
"Master, we will use our powers and heal you."
The sisters walked up and offered anxiously. "No, there's no need." Jacob quickly turned down their offer. "I'm only feeling a little lightheaded. I need a moment and then I'll be fine." At this time, General Arthur, who was in his royal gown, had promptly run over with his hunched back. "Best regards from this humble servant to the Dragon King, Your Highness, Prince, Miss Jade, and Miss Julia."
"General Arthur, please, this is too much,"
Jade and Julia nervously said.
"We have yet to thank you for looking out for us when we were captives at the Ice Palace."
"Things are different now. The 2 of you serve Prince Jacob, and this humble servant dare not treat you with any disregard,"
General Arthur replied cautiously. "Sometimes I forget that I'm actually supposed to be a royal now," Jacob thought about General Arthur's words. "I'm going to cut to the chase. Tonight, I've brought Jacob here to pick out a suitable cultivation technique for him. This cultivation technique is for his future long-term cultivation. Also, with the help of this technique, Hopefully, he can advance to first level soon. Dracon explained calmly as he stopped General Arthur's polite words. General Arthur's eyes lit up at once. Prince is definitely very gifted. In such a short period, he's been able to advance to the third level. That is truly... Enough. Again, Dracon interrupted him. We're on a tight schedule here. Take Jacob to the Profound Cultivation Palace and help him choose. Anything below the indigo grade would do. Be sure to explain each technique in detail. Jade and Julia, join them and provide some constructive advice when you can. I will check on the progress of my brother's Heavenly Tribulation altar. When you are done, let me know through voice transmission. After giving out the orders, Dracon turned into a flash of light and instantly disappeared. Prince, please come with me. General Arthur slightly bowed at Jacob. You don't have to call me Prince, Jacob replied. Haha, Master Jacob, please come this way. I have surely missed you since your last departure, the general said good-naturedly. With a hunched back, General Arthur led them to the Profound Cultivation Palace. On the way, General Arthur continued to express his fondness for Jacob. Jacob looked at the rainbow-colored palace, still just as fascinated by it as he had been the first time. As they entered the Profound Cultivation Palace, just like last time, General Arthur started showing Jacob around from the first level. The cultivation techniques were arranged according to the following grades: red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, blue, and violet. In this order, all the red grade techniques that were the weakest cultivation techniques were placed on the first floor, and there were more than 300 of them. Yet, any of these lowest level cultivation techniques were still 10 times or even 100 times more powerful than the basic spirit concentration scroll that Jacob had been strenuously cultivating. Red grade cultivation techniques are most fitting for beginners. They are easier to cultivate, but their powers are minimal. Leading Jacob, General Arthur showcased the bookshelves one by one. However, with the clan's treasured collections of more than 1,000 years, even these lowest level cultivation techniques would be held in high regard and could lead to reigns of terror if mortal beings were to ever get their hands on them, he pointed out proudly. He might not know that the human world is now very different from a few hundred years ago. It had become a concrete jungle. It was nothing like the era in which cultivation sects thrived and prospered. Of course, if the prince only hopes to achieve first level, then these red grade cultivation techniques would be your best choice, as they are easy to cultivate. With your gift, as long as you're willing to work hard, it should only take about 2 weeks for you to enter first level, General Arthur further added. Episode 128. Difficult Decision. Recalling Susan's advice, Jacob certainly would not choose these cultivation techniques, which offer minimal potential. He immediately walked towards the staircase and said, "Let's go check out the levels above." General Arthur hurried ahead to lead the way, saying, "Yes, Master Jacob, please follow me." Jade and Julia looked at each other before following them upstairs. These are orange grade cultivation techniques. They are slightly more difficult to cultivate, but they come with stronger powers. Again, regarding future potential, it is about the same as the red grade ones. In the beginning, you would make rapid progress, but after that, it would be tough to advance any further. If you must achieve a higher realm, then you will have to switch to a better cultivation technique and start cultivating from the beginning again. While explaining, General Arthur turned to Jacob and suggested, "This humble servant believes that one shouldn't aim high at the beginning of cultivation. It is safer for you to opt for an orange grade cultivation technique. As long as you persevere,
most of the cultivation techniques here could help you achieve the second level. Furthermore, all of these techniques have considerable power. As long as you are not up against opponents who are 1 or 2 levels higher, it should be enough for you to defend yourself.
Taking General Arthur's words into consideration, Jacob replied, "Let's go up 1 more level and see." General Arthur nodded. He indeed dared not contradict Jacob's will. After leading the group to the 3rd floor, he spoke.
The cultivation techniques stored on this level are yellow grade. The characteristics of these techniques include slow and steady foundation building and a lack of combat power. I believe that if you want to advance to 1st level quickly, yellow grade cultivation techniques would not be your best choice.
Jacob turned his head and asked suddenly, "Which one is Susan cultivating?"
Susan is cultivating a yellow grade cultivation technique.
General Arthur promptly moved towards a bookshelf, lifted its seal, and pulled out a technique.
This is the one, Frozen Scroll.
After receiving the technique from General Arthur, Jacob casually flipped through the book. There were only a few dozen pages, and there seemed to be nothing special about it. Without the array formation's bright lights surrounding it, it looked like an ordinary book with an ancient-style cover. Even when discarded on an open street, no one would take it as a valuable antique. Jacob returned the technique to General Arthur and said, "I'll also pick from this level then." For a second, General Arthur became dazed.
A yellow grade cultivation technique? Master Jacob, how about we go up 1 more level to see the other ones first? According to the Dragon King, green grade cultivation techniques are also an option.
I'm assuming that green grade cultivation techniques would grant me greater powers, but it would be even more difficult to cultivate them than the yellow grade ones? Jacob asked.
Indeed,
General Arthur answered with a nod. Then I'll pass on that level. This is the type I want. A cultivation technique that is more helpful for laying a solid foundation and having room for advancement in the realm, Jacob declared. Even though General Arthur had more advice to give, he gave up as soon as he saw that Jacob had become determined.
Then you can pick any from this level, Master. Every cultivation technique comes with a brief introduction. If you have any questions, I will be right here.
Thank you, General Arthur. Jacob smiled to show his gratitude towards the general. After that, he began strolling from one bookshelf to another, browsing the books one by one. At the same time, General Arthur was following right behind him like a shopping guide, always ready to answer any type of question Jacob might have. Is Frozen Scroll more fitting for girls to cultivate? Jacob inquired while browsing.
The cultivation techniques of the dragon tribe do not differentiate between genders. Susan has the metal water body type, and the Frozen Scroll is mainly a water elemental cultivation technique that also happens to encompass the offensive attributes of the metal elementals. It happened to be the perfect fit for Susan to cultivate.
General Arthur clarified patiently. In that case, should I choose a cultivation technique that is water elemental as well? Jacob asked again as he noticed that the elements of each cultivation technique were labeled underneath their names.
Since you are not a native of the dragon tribe physically, yours is a chaotic mix of the 5 elements. However, the fact that Princess Sophie's dragon core is now in your body does make it inclined more towards water,
General Arthur answered. What about Jade and Julia? Can they also choose cultivation techniques here? Jacob abruptly raised another question. That was the first time Jacob called them by their first names, and the sisters smiled joyfully, seeing their master acknowledge them.
Master, thank you for being thoughtful. However, both my sister and I have our own cultivation techniques and do not need to choose from here,
Jade said to Jacob. General Arthur nodded in response.
Indeed.
both Ms. Jade and Ms. Julia have already reached top-tier 7th level, so they do not need to choose cultivation techniques here. Of the entire Profound Cultivation Palace, only the techniques above the Indigo grade might be of some help to them. Oh, I see, Jacob said casually again as he continued to move and read the introduction of each cultivation technique. Soph's third uncle is invincible in the human realm. I guess the cultivation technique that he's cultivating would be the best purple grade? Lord Kenneth is the #1 master in the North Atlantic. Nonetheless, he is not cultivating a purple grade technique, but a blue grade one. Although our clan has treasured a purple grade cultivation technique since ancient times, it seems that no one has been able to cultivate it. Back then, Lord Kenneth was confident and proud, so he attempted it, but he failed as well, General Arthur stated. What about Susan? She is extremely gifted. She must have tried it as well? Jacob further questioned. Master Jacob, you must know that no matter how amazing Susan is, she is still not a member of this clan. To show due respect to the elder who adopted her, North Atlantic had made an exception, and that was the only reason she was able to obtain a yellow grade cultivation technique in the first place. There is no way that we would let her have her hands on the cultivation techniques of the green, blue, or purple grades. We never lend those to outsiders, General Arthur further clarified. At first, Jacob felt sorry for Susan when the general regarded her as an outsider, but on second thought, Jacob understood the clan's decision. With a mere yellow grade cultivation technique, Susan was already able to achieve mid-tier 8th level and had become an inspector who was in charge of monitoring the North Atlantic region. Everyone in the city had to have a modest attitude towards her. If the clan were to help her become even stronger, with even more immense power, they would only put themselves and the Dragon Palace at risk. Jade, Julia, what are your attributes? Jacob thought of a question and turned around to ask the sisters who were following him closely.
Master, we both have a 5 elemental body type,
they answered. 5 elements? Isn't that the same as mine? Jacob wondered aloud. Noting the puzzled look on Jacob's face, General Arthur answered his question. He pointed out immediately, Ms. Jade and Ms. Julia are immortal maids. Their bodies consist of a complete range of the 5 elements, which is different from the chaotic mix of the 5 elements in your body. Still, Jacob seemed confused. Therefore, General Arthur continued explaining. For instance, let's say their bodies consist of 5 pillars, each of a distinct element. The pillars are all clearly distinct and independent, which means Ms. Jade and Ms. Julia can freely utilize any one of the elements at any time. Whereas in your body, it's like sand grains of 5 different colors all mixed together in one pile. It's difficult to tell one from the other. The process of cultivation is to retain only the sand of one color and eliminate the others. In the end, you would solidify the purified sand into a pillar of one specific element. Jacob found this explanation easier to understand. Susan had the metal water body type, which meant she was born with 2 pure elemental pillars inside of her. Coupled with her diligent efforts, her cultivation progress was otherworldly speedy. On the other hand, Jade and Julia had even better physical condition than Susan. With a complete range of the 5 elements that were distinct and independent, to say that their cultivation progress was otherworldly speedy would be an understatement. What cultivation does is to continuously utilize one of the elements and solidify that element. By doing that, it could even help transform the other elements to achieve complete purity in the body, General Arthur added. Jacob nodded quietly. He felt like he had gained immense knowledge from General Arthur's detailed explanation. There were a lot more factors involved in choosing his cultivation technique than Jacob had originally thought. There were a lot more factors involved in choosing his cultivation technique than Jacob had originally thought. Episode 129, The Sword Shadow Scroll. General Arthur, how about this pure water scroll? Its main attribute is water, and both its offense and defense attributes are water elemental as well. Jacob stopped in front of a technique and asked, "This pure water scroll can command the vast water elements in the world. For attack, it can form weapons such as water arrows. For defense, it can create armors such as water shields. All in all, it has limited power, but it helps moisturize and nourish the body. Also, cultivation of it rarely goes wrong." General Arthur continued, explaining with patience. Jacob further took out a few techniques that he was interested in, and General Arthur introduced each one of them dutifully. Seeing that General Arthur's mouth was becoming parched from talking too much, Jacob felt terrible for asking so many questions. Yet, Jacob found that the selection of cultivation techniques was even more difficult and important than picking out his top choices for universities after school. Since it would dictate the future direction of his cultivation, he dared not take it lightly. As a result, he couldn't help but inquire about every single one of them. From time to time, Jade and Julia would also chime in when they found that General Arthur was not thorough enough about certain areas of a technique. Only then did Jacob realize that the sisters had extensive experience and were incredibly knowledgeable. He also understood that having the sisters' company could be beneficial to his cultivation. It was almost like having two personal tutors whose abilities were comparable to Susan's. Even then, he decided that he would still make time to report to Susan at 4 o'clock in the afternoon as often as possible. After all, he was her monitored subject. As Jacob contemplated, he walked up to a cultivation technique with a gray-colored cover. All the other techniques had revealed a blue cover after the protection from the array formations was lifted off, but this one was gray, which made it seem very special. "General Arthur, would you please take this one out for me?" Jacob requested, as he pointed at the Sword Shadow Scroll. With a wave upwards, General Arthur had removed the protective veil. He took out the technique and handed it to Jacob. "This is a great 5-elemental cultivation technique. It is different from the others in that this one requires all 5 elements in the body to progress at the same pace. Others only need you to cultivate 1 or 2 of the 5 elements in your body. There were a few elders who had attempted to cultivate this technique when they were young. However, the progress was so slow that it was beyond their imagination and patience. After holding out for some time, they all gave up." General Arthur commented. "Great 5-elemental, a chaotic mix of the 5 elements." Jacob thought for a second and remarked, "How about I go with this one then? I've looked at most of them, and the others are not very interesting to me." General Arthur was bewildered, as he was expecting Jacob to place the book right back after he told him that even the elders couldn't cultivate this technique. "Master Jacob, are you sure about this? It is a nice idea to have the 5 elements progress at the same pace at once. It sounds safe and sure-footed," Jacob replied. "Having the 5 elements progress together is like having to build 5 buildings at the same time, and the progress has to be even and stable. Whereas, if you go with a different one, you'd only need to build 1 building with 1 element. It is indeed safe and sure-footed, but..." General Arthur tried to change Jacob's mind.
"Master, I think it is a good choice,"
Jade encouraged Jacob. "All right, let's go with this one then," Jacob turned and said to General Arthur after he smiled at Jade. He believed that the safer and more reliable the cultivation, the more confident he would be when he had to transmit life energy to Sophie in the future. In comparison, its combat power was less of his concern. Seeing that Jacob had adopted her suggestion, Jade began smiling sweetly. "Yes, Master Jacob, Now that you have made up your mind, have a try at it. If you find it unfitting, you can come back and switch to another one." General Arthur sighed faintly. He felt like all his great efforts had gone to waste. As much as he wanted to object to this decision, he could not go against the future prince. As he led the three out of the profound cultivation palace, he released a voice transmission to Dracon. Soon, Dracon had flown to meet them. After he landed steadily on the ground, he questioned the sword shadow scroll in Jacob's hands. "How come you chose this one?" Looking slightly agitated, Dracon shot General Arthur a stare. Remaining silent, General Arthur kept his head down and had now hunched his back even more. Just as Jacob was about to exempt General Arthur from being responsible for his choice of cultivation technique, Dracon suddenly changed his expression and recreated the energy sphere that surrounded Jacob. "Let's go." Jacob didn't even get to say goodbye to General Arthur before 3 flashes of light burst from the surface of the water and flew towards the city, appearing as small as dots in the vast and boundless ocean. They briskly flew past the majestic atmosphere imposed by the cold, towering waves. Shortly, the city came into Jacob's sight, which was half dead and half frenzied at this time of night. As they were traveling at an insane speed, all the buildings and structures seemed to be going backward rapidly. Before Jacob knew it, Dracon had landed them steadily and was now standing on the ground. Jacob had become terribly pale again. He could feel a wave of nature essence and a mouthful of blood rushing up his chest, and he almost threw up. "Too bad you are wearing those bracelets that are resistant to all treasures. Otherwise, we could have ridden on my sword. That way, it would be more stable and less tortuous for you." Dracon seemed to try to comfort Jacob as he patted his shoulder and said. Jacob was excited at the thought of riding on a sword. He then realized it was already past midnight and followed Dracon into the house quietly. Likewise, Jade and Julia became quiet and stealthy as they made their way into the house. Seated on the sofa, Helen was watching TV. As she sensed the slight movement in the house, she promptly got up to welcome the group. "How did it go? What cultivation technique did you pick?" she asked. Jacob showed her the cultivation technique in his hands. "Why this one?" Helen seemed disappointed as she turned to question Dracon. "This cultivation technique is rather slow. Why didn't you pick a better one?" "Jacob likes it, so let him try it out. Even though it will be slow to see progress with this one, it is also hard for anything to go wrong with it. Jacob should be able to gain some good experience from cultivating it." After giving his answer, Dracon asked Helen, "Where's Soph?" "She's in bed already. What time do you think it is?" Helen hinted at the clock on the wall. Following her direction, Jacob looked over and found that it was already 2 o'clock in the morning. "Soph worked on her homework until very late. I think she was waiting for Jacob to return, but her eyes were failing her, so I told her to go to sleep first," Helen added. As he heard Sophie was attempting to wait for him, Jacob felt a small smile form on his lips. Sophie was also very concerned with the kind of cultivation technique he was going to pick out. "You guys must be tired. Hurry up and get some rest." Helen turned to Jacob and the sisters. "Jacob can stay in Sophie's room, and Jade and Julia can stay in the guest room next door. Soph is asleep, so try to go up quietly." "Thanks, Helen. You should go get some rest, too," Jacob responded, as he couldn't help but begin yawning. After looking through the cultivation techniques at the Dragon Palace for a few hours, Jacob had become weary and sleepy. One by one, the three began tiptoeing upstairs. On their way up, Jacob could vaguely hear Dracon talking to Helen. "The construction of the altar is about 80% complete, and my brother is in good condition as well. It looks like there is a chance that he can make it through the heavenly tribulation this time." Turning the doorknob, Jacob stealthily got into Sophie's room. Likewise, while holding hands, Jade and Julia went to rest in the bedroom next door after whispering good night to Jacob. After silently closing the door to Sophie's room, Jacob tiptoed over to Sophie's bed. He saw that she had rolled herself into the quilt, looking extremely comfortable. As expected, she was deeply asleep. Jacob quietly observed her. She looked so peaceful and pretty under the dim light of the night lamp. Her curly eyelashes softly covered her eyes, and the skin on her face was tender. After standing there for about 5 minutes, Jacob decided to call it a day as well. Just like last time, a bed had been made for him on the floor. After taking off his jacket, Jacob crawled into it. He placed the Sword Shadow scroll by his pillow and practiced the Spirit Concentration scroll a few times before peacefully falling asleep. Episode 130. We study here. As soon as Jacob opened his eyes, he let out a little squeal. Sophie's face was right above his as she stared at him from her sitting position on the bed. Jacob sighed when he saw that it was just her and rubbed his eyes to wake himself up completely. When he opened his eyes again, he noticed that Sophie was holding his cultivation technique in her hand and had a thoughtful expression on her face.
Why did you choose this yellow grade technique?
Sophie asked in a disappointed tone. I don't know, it just felt right, Jacob answered helplessly. Everyone was doubting his decision right now.
But don't you have to get to the first level quickly before my birthday?
Sophie queried further. I do, but all the other techniques were restricting the level I could cultivate till. I think this technique can help me strengthen my foundation and is also perfect for my body type, Jacob explained, hoping that at least she will support him. Sophie smiled at him with reassurance and said,
If you think that is your best option, then it must be. It is all about the instinct. Otherwise, you can always take up a different technique if you change your mind.
She tried to cheer him up. Jacob nodded and smiled at her. He knew that Sophie was worried about him not being able to break through to the first level before her birthday, because that would have dire consequences. She didn't want him to feel pressured, though, at least not more than he already was. They both talked a little more before getting up to start the day. Sophie headed to the ensuite bathroom in her room, while Jacob went and stood in front of the open window. He began breathing in the fresh air from the bamboo that was grown in the backyard as he tried hard to clear his head. Unexpectedly, the window of the next room had also opened. 2 faces appeared out of the window and started breathing in the refreshing air from the yard. Promptly, they discovered Jacob and greeted him in unison.
Good morning, Master.
Morning. Jacob quickly waved at them before withdrawing his head from outside of the window. Jacob let out a long sigh as he realized that he had almost forgotten about the sisters' presence. Walking back into the room, Jacob noticed that he was getting late for college and Sophie was still in the bathroom. He knocked on the door and asked, Hey, Soph, I'm getting late, actually. Could you pass my toothbrush and towel from inside? With the number of times he stayed over, it was only rational that Jacob kept a set of toiletries at Sophie's home. The last time he slept in Sophie's room, his stuff was still in her bathroom instead of the guest bathroom like it usually was.
It's okay, come inside.
Soph's muffled voice came from the other side of the door. Getting the permission, Jacob didn't hesitate to open the unlocked door and step inside. In the washroom, Sophie was brushing her teeth before the sink in her pajamas. With her mouth full of foam and her cheeks puffed up as always, she looked extremely cute. Jacob walked over and stood right next to Sophie. He picked up his toothbrush and started brushing his teeth as well. At this time, Sophie started studying Jacob from the reflection in the mirror. She could clearly see the changes that had come in his appearance ever since he started cultivating. He looked more mature, his jaw was more defined, and overall, he looked more charming than before. She got lost in her thoughts as she stared at him through the mirror. Currently, he was dressed in a casual t-shirt and sweats. His hair was messy from the bed, and his eyes looked a little tired. Even after all that, he somehow still managed to look handsome to her. Noticing Sophie's gaze through the mirror, Jacob also looked at her reflection. Now that their eyes met through the mirror, Sophie immediately looked away and focused on something else. Her cheeks turned slightly red after being caught checking Jacob out. Jacob smiled to himself, seeing Sophie get embarrassed. He decided to keep his mouth shut since he didn't have a death wish. Both of them continued to brush their teeth while stealing occasional glances at each other and smiling whenever their eyes met. Sophie got done before him and went on to wash her face. After that, she proceeded with her morning skincare routine. Jacob watched her as she went on to pick one product after another and apply it to her face, washing some off and letting some be. He was fascinated to see her use so many different things on her skin. He had always lived around boys who used the 3-in-1 shampoo, body wash, and conditioner. This was new to him. No wonder she's always glowing, he thought to himself. Your teeth are going to fall off if you keep brushing like that. Sophie let out a chuckle after seeing Jacob's face. Jacob realized that he got so lost in watching her that he was still brushing his teeth. He immediately washed his face and averted his gaze to look at anything but Sophie.
I want to take a shower now,
Sophie declared. Jacob took the hint and left the bathroom at once, with his towel hanging on his shoulder. He took a quick shower in the other bathroom and headed back to Sophie's room to gather his things. He found her already there, all ready for school. I'll head down now. Jacob took his tutoring materials and his new cultivation technique and got out of her room. Downstairs, Jade and Julia were busy helping Helen with breakfast. Their voices sounded delighted, and it seemed like they were having a great time with Helen. Helen always manages to make everyone feel comfortable, Jacob thought appreciatively as he entered their view. As Jacob went down the stairs, the sisters looked up and greeted him aloud.
Master!
Though Jacob found their passionate greeting a little overwhelming, he laughed awkwardly while waving his hand. Morning! Today, they were no longer wearing their flowy dresses. Instead, they were each wearing a simple floral dress paired with a denim jacket. It looks like they always matched their outfits. In these modern-style dresses, the sisters looked much younger and would fit in with the crowd much better. However, their beauty was still ethereal. Just from the style alone, Jacob could tell that it had to be Helen who chose the sisters' outfits. He had a lot of respect for Helen's taste. After all, she was a renowned architect who had great taste. Soon, carrying her backpack, Sophie had also come downstairs and joined the others for breakfast. Dressed in a business suit, Dracon came out of his room as well. Seated around the dining table, they enjoyed a hearty breakfast. Afterward, Helen drove to work and was responsible for dropping Sophie off at school on her way. Dracon, on the other hand, was driving Jacob and the sisters to college. When they arrived at the main entrance of the college, Jacob got out of the car and Jade and Julia followed suit. Promptly, Dracon turned the car around and headed to his office. As he walked past the entrance, Jacob realized that the sisters were still following him. You don't have to follow me anymore for the rest of the day. You can go do your own thing, Jacob turned around and said to them.
But we're here for our own thing,
Julia replied timidly. What? Jacob looked at them with a puzzled look.
We go to school here.
Julia spoke softly as she looked at the university building that stood tall not far ahead.